On this edition of Somerville Neighborhood News, it's back to school time in Somerville. Meet the new superintendent, Mary Skipper. Welcome to Somerville Neighborhood News. I'm Heather Avison. Tonight we're going to spend the half hour getting to know Mary Skipper, the new superintendent of schools here in Somerville. She spent the last 18 years with the Boston public school system before accepting the position in Somerville this spring. In 2002, she launched the TechBoston Academy, a pilot school within the Boston public school system. Her accomplishments there were noted by no less than President Obama, who visited the school with Education Secretary Arne Duncan and Melinda Gates from the Gates Foundation. Ms. Skipper, welcome to Somerville.
Thank you very much,
Welcome to SCATV.
Thank you.
And start off by telling us a little bit about TechBoston Academy and what you've accomplished there.
Sure. So TechBoston, every educator sort of dreams about the chance to start something. And I had a unique opportunity back in 2002 with a team of educators to actually start a high school. It was a small high school, 6 to 12 it eventually became, but when we first began it was a 9 to 12. And it was right in Dorchester, and the goal of it was really to bring applied learning through technology into the classroom with very dedicated teachers and staff, and take students who typically, had not been successful in the past in education and give them an opportunity to really accelerate their learning, accelerate their skills, go on to college and go on to career. And so it was a wonderful time I had as a headmaster there. I learned an incredible amount as an educator about teachers and how important, how essential teachers are to our students' development, as well as our student support in terms of guidance. My kids were terrific. They were wonderful, class after class. I had brothers and sisters and, cousins and extended families. And, it really, I think as we moved back into the Dorchester area, it really became a touchstone for Dorchester, a sense of pride.
And you mentioned teachers. That's one of the things that I've read a lot about the success of TechBoston Academy, was the relationship between the students and the teachers, which implies a relationship between the teachers and the leadership.
Absolutely.
How did you facilitate that?
Well, I trusted my teachers, and in many ways I got out of their way. I enabled them. I listened to them, and I gave them the resources that they needed to get the job done. We had a very tight relationship among our staff, worked very collaboratively. I made sure that there was time in the day for that to happen. I think that the students saw that relationship. And they, when they see the adults having healthy, positive interactions, that carries over to the students in a really powerful way. The more we invest in people, the more we invest in our staff. It tends to be in a school or in a district, 85–90% of the budget are the people. So, one of my philosophies that I've learned from TechBoston and carried out in my other work has been to make sure that we develop the people that, we work with, that evaluation is a form of formation, that we're really trying to sort of move everyone, no matter what role they play in a school, to the place that they can develop as a professional and maximize their profession. And that translates into really positive outcomes in the classroom for our kids.
And I think every teacher wants that. Every teacher wants the support, but they also want to have independence within their classroom to pursue the interests of the kids, their own interests in their own manner. At TechBoston Academy, you had a little bit more freedom than most schools do. You had the freedom to hire and fire within that. How do you translate that relationship into a more traditional system where you don't have as much autonomy and you can't even really give your principals that much autonomy?
So it's really interesting. TechBoston was a pilot school. It was actually the last school to become a pilot school in Boston, before we had innovation schools and before the state created other avenues for autonomy. But within TechBoston, I was very deliberate about not creating structures that we couldn't transfer to the larger system. And that was important because if TechBoston was to have an impact greater than just our own school, we needed to make sure the systems and structures could actually apply elsewhere. So staffing was a great example of that. We had, for instance, in staffing the ability to fire or to access teachers, particularly excess, where we did not have to go through the normal union rule. I never accessed a teacher out of TechBoston. I saw it as, my role to develop teachers. And that's not to say some teachers didn't choose to leave, but if they chose to leave, it was always because we sort of came to an understanding, the teacher as well, that either TechBoston wasn't a good fit or teaching wasn't a good fit. So really, I think the autonomies, we worked hard to push the ones that we felt could benefit the whole system, but really live within, in a lot of ways, the regular same rules, systems, and structures as the BPS. One of the things TechBoston did attract was a lot of teachers who love technology. We were the first one-to-one school, and I think as such, teachers who really saw a little bit of that power of transformation with technology in teaching, and they had that appetite for it. Many of them were the ones that would apply. It was not a place, if you were a phobic of technology, you wanted to go. But I also saw teachers who didn't have a lot of experience but were open to it, and I saw them grow incredibly as they saw how much technology could enhance their classroom on a daily basis and their engagement of their children.
And that may be something that you see more of in
Absolutely.
Somerville. Obviously, teachers are on top of the technology that's out there, but Somerville may not have given them the opportunity to do that. A lot of the demographics of your school community are going to be similar here in Somerville as they
Yes.
were in Dorchester.
Yes.
Economically disadvantaged, cultural diversity.
Yes.
How are you going to translate that experience to Somerville?
So, one of the things that interested me in Somerville is that it sort of is a small version of Boston, but with all of the richness, the diversity that Boston has. And that was really the type of district I was looking for. I wasn't actually actively thinking about going into a superintendency. I was actually pretty happy in Boston. But when the opportunity came up and I was sort of looking at the superintendencies, the only place that I was interested in was here. And it was for this very reason that I think, it brings just an incredible richness of language and culture, experience all in one place. And that I see as, positives in every way, shape, and form. So I intend to build on that. I think our staff is hungry to explore that area. We'll be doing work certainly around cultural proficiency. But also, I think that technology is a wonderful way to actually universally bring people together. Help us to go deeper, see the world in a different way than we could normally see through one lens. So I'm looking forward to taking the experience I had with the population I had in TechBoston. Some of the same kinds of urban issues we see around things like graduation and dropout rate. We see a little bit here in Somerville, and that will be an area that for sure we will work on. The high school's done incredible work. Headmaster Attiri has done incredible work with his team, and so it has a great foundation to build upon. And I think, we'll work looking at some systems, some structures, some additional programming, all of which I think will, speak to keeping kids in school, making sure that, they have as many opportunities for that career, for that college, for that, that post-high school experience, which I'm looking forward to.
Now, I know you said that was the reason that you wanted to come to Somerville, but I think there might be another reason that you haven't shared with us, is that you're a local girl. This is your backyard.
I am. It's actually, it has been so pleasant to be back in the area. Not that I was that far away, but you tend to kind of sort of go where you work and where you live, and coming back here, this parts of Somerville, it's as if it didn't change at all, and then there's other parts that I don't recognize, and I'm still trying to get used to relearning the streets, the shortcuts. But it's a familiarity which speaks of home. I grew up right in the Dilboy area, and I worked. I used to come down to Davis Square for Sacco's to bowl and to eat at Steve's Ice Cream, and the Rosebud, with the diner. So I certainly knew, the different parts of Somerville. I worked for Foodmaster, as I shared in my interview, which I think, people, interestingly enough, people resonated with. But, that was all part of the area I grew up in. To come back and work with students who live here now and be able to sort of have some of that shared experience, and to be able to, give them the same opportunities that I got growing up, for education, for work, for life. I think that's in part what really called me back to this area.
Do you think that gives you a little bit of credibility with the students, as opposed to being someone who came from Boston, who's now going to tell us and the teachers as well. You know, someone
Sure.
who came from Boston who's not going to tell us how we're going to do this. You're really one of us. Hey, I remember back when Sacco's was just bowling.
Was not Sacco's now.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right.
You know, does that help? Does that help just build a foundation?
I think so. I think anytime you have shared experience with people, I think that at least allows a platform to to be able to kind of springboard onto. And it's just interesting because as I went around this spring and certainly this summer talking to staff, to students, to parents, and just being able to kind of bridge some of those memories. It's almost like you fall into talking and you sort of forget that there was a separation at all, which has been very nice. But I want to work hard for the students and the families and the staff here. I have been so impressed, Heather, with how hardworking everyone is here. The adults they really care about the kids. They want what's best for the students. The parents, really want to be involved and help and be supportive. And when you have all of that, and you have a system that, the former superintendent laid such a strong foundation for, really, anything can happen. You can really make a lot happen. So I'm looking forward to working with my team and with the school-based teams and with the parents in the community to just really kind of take this to the next level.
And you've made a lot of changes in your own life, moving from one
Yes.
level to another. You started out with a degree in the classics,
I
studying
did.
Greek and Latin, and then teaching that at Boston College High School.
I did.
And how did that girl decide that she wanted to start a technology high school?
No, it was an interesting journey. I started in the Boston Public Schools teaching Latin, and then I went to BC High, and at BC High, where my husband is currently, I taught Latin, Greek, and then, when you're a young teacher, sometimes you teach whatever you need to teach, and so that's sort of what happened. So I started teaching, the Latin, the Greek, and then they asked me to teach math, and then eventually technology, and I had a background in that from high school. I felt comfortable with that, so I ended up doing that, and in teaching the technology, there was something about it that I saw a fire in the kids, that just the level of engagement rose so much when they were able to be able to communicate with each other and to see and learn things that they were interested in through the technology that you might not be able to accomplish in a traditional class time. And so that just sort of lit the fire for the technology. And then I came into back into the Boston Public Schools, but this time I was a technology project manager. And I got to work in schools doing with instructional technology. And then really the Gates Foundation sort of tapped the superintendent and said, we're interested in this TechBoston initiative, which we had going, giving professional development and students. We had 2,000 students around the city doing high-level technology courses and taking certifications that many people said they're kids, they can't do that. And the kids, once again, proved them wrong. And it was really Gates Foundation that sort of approached us about creating a school for that technology, which later would become TechBoston. And so I was part of that initial 7-person team to design the school and to, I again went into it never thinking I would be a principal and lead it, and the way life evolved is I felt called to it, after writing the design for it. And that was probably one of the most pivotal things to happen because it was that launching of creating the school that, just seeing the technology and the level of risk of the students and how together it just brought things together that really, sort of springboarded TechBoston and absolutely cemented my career choice in education.
I think there's technology that we use to teach.
Yes.
Smart boards, computers, things like that. And then there's teaching technology.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I used to call it content and tool. The tool is that there's tremendous ways in which technology can be a tool, be it a laptop or a smart board or a manipulative probes in science. Really there's no field today that doesn't use technology in some way, shape, or form. You can't fix a car without knowing how to do diagnostics, knowing how to use the technology tools. So those are sort of the tools, and that's one level of the learning piece. The content piece is, it can be very specific to things like coding or learning skills around how to do video editing, which you guys know full well. And that's teaching life skill as well to the student of how then to take that and apply it. And that can enrich further their academic learning, but it can also take them in career choices, in areas where they, apply logic and they decide they want to be a programmer, an engineer, or a scientist, a journalist, for sure, that uses the technology to capture it. So really, it just opens amazing doors. But it's when the content and that tool set come together as a teacher that you really sort of see all of the neurons kind of light up. And
your background, which is diverse from the classics to technology, really has the background view of where those two can come together.
Right. I mean, I think the thing that connects them is innovation. Interestingly enough, people would think classics are somewhat static, and they think of them as old. But part of the richness of classics was how far ahead folks were in their thinking, in their philosophy, in their writing, in their science discovery. There was so much innovation that went on in the classical period of time that you could, read just a small portion of the literature and only know a tip of it. And I think technology, is a nice bridge to that innovation piece. It's how we live in the world today in our own classical way, in our discovery mode. And so for me, it seems like an odd transition, but for me, it just was a very natural transition as I moved from, the study of Latin and Greek and inquiry to applying that to modern day computer technology.
Now you have a couple of teachers that you have to answer to.
I do.
Your husband.
I'm always reminded of this. Yes. My husband.
Your husband and your daughter are both teachers.
Absolutely.
Do they keep you grounded? Do they remind you?
They absolutely keep me
who's
grounded.
in charge?
They do. My husband is just such a terrific teacher. He's been a teacher for over 30 years. And what I love about him is that he's never lost in any way, shape, or form his passion for it. Every class of kids is a new group of students for him to learn, figure out as a puzzle. And he will often remind me that the administrator's job is to support the teachers. And he's right. That is exactly what our job is. And my daughter is now a third-year teacher in Denver, and she's she was in a turnaround school, which I fielded quite a few calls crying at 9 o'clock at night, and I think one of the things that she reminds me, in the few times that she's talked about should I stay in teaching, should I leave teaching, is how critical how important it is for us to support our new teachers. When a teacher's in their first 3 to 5 years, people think kind of they get it down, but they don't. They need that extra support, and they need to know that their fellow teachers are there. They need to know that their administrators, their school leaders are there. And it's been very grounding for me to realize how pivotal that role is. Because to think my daughter, who I know, from the time she was in junior high, was talking about teaching and wanting to teach. And to think at any moment that she would doubt, is this something that I should do? Is this my calling? Because she's frustrated or she's not getting that support, just eats at me. And so it just every day reminds me that, my job is to really make sure I'm supporting our school leaders and administrators and supporting our teachers, and that, I'm helping them to do the same.
I've done a little bit of teaching in my life.
Yes.
And what surprised me, this may sound very naive, was how lonely it is.
It can be.
It's just you and these kids in a classroom. And so when you talk about supporting the teachers and making sure that they're not
Absolutely.
going home alone at night and crying, on a very personal level, teachers also need that support.
They do. They need, we need to find the systems and structures to build in for collaboration for teachers. That's how, teachers become great. They learn from each other. They work through issues with each other, but they also, they keep the students in the center of the table. And that's something that's personally extremely important to me, is that we are all always reminded of what we do and why we do it, and that's because of the students. That's the greater glory. There is none when it comes to education. So I think for teachers to have that opportunity and to have, you know, the expert, be it another teacher, a master teacher, or be it an administrator, or be it an outside expert, be able to come in and kind of help work and develop around those areas, and to get, you know, really good constructive feedback from those that are working with them to form, to help formation. I think that's going to be a big piece of this year, what we really kind of launch and start to work on.
Great. Well, we'll be following up with you on that.
I'm excited about that.
I want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
And you've already referred to it here, is the market basket, the Johnny's Food Master story.
Yes.
You have a beautiful resume, very accomplished. And at the very bottom of it, you have chosen to include your experience working in a supermarket. I'm sure that that was very well reasoned. And tell us what that reason is.
Well, you know, and it's no slight to any of the education schools I've gone to. I've been very blessed to get great education. But I learned a tremendous about young people and how to work with people and what service is by working in a supermarket. Food Master was very family oriented and very customer focused. And it was drilled into me from the time I was 14 all the way into my 20s when I worked there. You know, the customer comes first, and in our industry, the customer is the student and the parents. I also realized that one of the unique things about the supermarket is that in order to manage a supermarket, which is fundamentally what I had to do, you have to sort of do the different roles, you know, within it, to actually understand how to manage someone that's doing produce or doing grocery or doing the front end, and then to be able to give them feedback. If you don't have that shared experience, it's very hard for the person to take that advice. And so I sort of had the unique experience of being able to sort of rotate through and get that experience at all levels, and then be able to apply it as a store manager, where I had to manage a whole group of people, many of whom were very young, all to a common goal. So, you know, in education, as you become a principal, and you know, certainly as you become an assistant superintendent or a superintendent, it's not too different. You know, you really need to understand, how do you get the best from the people you work with, and how do you make sure you support them in that and create that team atmosphere. So,
and you have played many of those roles.
Yes,
You've been a beginning teacher, you've been an experienced teacher, you've started a school, you've really played all those roles. So now when you
absolutely, and
there are people, you've got your street cred down.
Absolutely, and I, you know, what I love is that it's also applied learning. You know, it's not just the books, which, you know, sometimes can be, you know, that piece of education schools where a lot is you read it, but to put it to actual practice and work with the people on it, and then figure out what really works, what doesn't work, and what do I have to take with me. That's that applied learning piece that in K-12 is essential, and we need to continue to build toward. I think that's why I love vocational education. I love CTE education. I'm so happy with the work we do at Somerville High in these areas. We have a premier program. But I also think that's where technology allows for some of that applied learning as well. So I'm excited to put a lot of that to practice in the Somerville Public Schools. And I am proud of my time at Food Master. It was very formational for me.
Well, we're very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much.
We look forward to catching up with you. If you'll come back and visit us again and tell us how things are going after your first semester.
Absolutely.
And
I'll be listening, learning, you know, talking to people, especially in these next few months, and really getting to relearn Somerville in a very special way.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's our show for tonight. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another edition of Somerville Neighborhood News. I'm Heather Avison. Good night.